And we are live in the Storycraft Cafe. I am your host, Hank Garner. Today, I am super excited to have Deepa Varadarajan on the show with me, and she has a fantastic new book. It's called Late Bloomers, and it debuted yesterday. If you're listening to the live feed here, what an exciting time! New book releases are always so exciting. Welcome, Deepa. How are you?
I am great. Thank you so much for having me.
I'm excited to have you. Um, Deepa, one thing that I love to ask new people sometimes to kind of get the conversation juices started is, what is your first memory of wanting to be a writer or storyteller?
Yeah, it's interesting. I came to realizing that I wanted to be a writer somewhat late, I think. I really wasn't one of those people who always knew she wanted to be a writer from a very young age. And
Yeah.
in fact, it was something that I didn't really start seriously thinking about until I was in law school. But if I
Okay.
do look back on my childhood, I was an imaginative kid. And I especially think when I was faced with unpleasant tasks like cleaning my room or something like that,
Yeah.
I seem to recall coming up with stories to sort of make it all go faster. And so, yeah, yeah.
Where did you attend law school?
I went to Yale for law school.
Okay. I've met a number of writers who began their professional careers in law, and I always find one of the things I find most fascinating is the circuitous route that most of us take in our journey to become published writers, storytellers, and very rarely have I met an author who said, I've only always wanted to be a writer, and I had a singular focus and purpose. Most of the time, we venture over here, we collect some life experience in this thing, and then we meet new people and we collect some more experience there. And, this kind of story gumbo, forms in our hearts and minds, and it comes out, in some. So, do you see any connection between your study of the law and being a fiction writer?
Well, I can understand why there are quite a few lawyers who have turned writers or lawyers who like to write because I
Yeah,
think these are two professions that tend to draw people who are interested in the written language, who are interested
sure.
in words, right? Have an affinity for language. And I would say when you are a lawyer, especially if you're a litigator, you are going to be writing briefs a lot of the time. And there's a section of every brief called the fact section. And that's your chance to sort of tell the story of your client's case. And you'll try to do it in a way that generates the most empathy from the reader, the judge. And so there is sort of a storytelling element to that, I think.
Sure.
I think I can see why there are people who are lawyers may be drawn to being writers, and why people who are lawyers might be good at it. Also, I will say in law school, law professors love to pepper you with hypotheticals. So I'm a law professor now, actually, and so you love throwing out hypotheticals to your students. And in fact, when I am writing stories as part of my process, you're engaged in this what if I did this to
Right.
the character? What if I did that to the character? So there is this, you're engaged in these sort of hypotheticals as you're writing a story. So
Right. Right. Did you say that you were teaching law now?
yeah, I am a law professor.
Oh,
Yes.
nice, nice. How is there a parallel between, other than what you said about the love of the hypothetical? Is there something that um, comes from teaching that kind of opens new pathways of thought and imagination?
I mean, anytime you're kind of engaged in the world and you're around other people, I think that's always an opportunity to get ideas for stories, right? So,
Yeah,
uh, and in particular, I'm around a lot of young people. I work at a very vibrant place where you encounter lots of different types of people. So I think those interactions are always sort of helpful and just kind of getting your mind thinking about different kind of situations that people are in. And so in that sense, I think it's been
right.
helpful.
Gotcha. Your new book that just released yesterday, Late Bloomers, is this the first novel that you had ever written?
Yeah, it's the first novel I've ever written. It took me a very long time.
As
It
as
was-
a lot of first novels do. Yeah.
yes, you're sort of engaged in the exercise of figuring out how to write a novel
Right,
as you're writing a novel.
exactly. Yeah,
Mhm.
and then you're halfway through and go, "I don't think this is how novels work," and do a lot of backtracking.
Exactly. Throw a lot of pages away, do a lot of
Right,
rewriting.
right. Well, I'm fascinated, utterly fascinated by the beginnings of novels because in, uh in an artistic sense, a novel is, um similar to other, artistic pursuits, except it holds a very unique and special place in that you are the creator of worlds, of people inside your mind, and in one moment, the life of late bloomers did not exist in any form or fashion, and then either a character walks onto the stage of your mind, or you start playing the what if game, or maybe you observe something in your own family, or read a news article, or whatever it is, and then all the synapses start firing, and then the story does exist, and then it's your job as the writer to kind of dig that thing out and excavate it and polish it up until late bloomers is held in your hands. What was that very first moment of inspiration that later became late bloomers?
Yeah, so I mean, all of the characters and situations in this book are, very much a product of my imagination and um, that all that. But I would say the sort of very first spark
Yeah.
came about many, many years ago. About 20 years ago, I was dating somebody whose parents had recently divorced. He was Indian American. His parents had recently divorced, and his dad was beginning to try online dating. And I thought it was this really brave thing to sort of put yourself out there and try something new later in life. And at the same time, I was in my 20s, was having relationship issues like a lot of people in their 20s.
Right.
And all of these things sort of made me think, I've never read a story before about recently divorced a recently divorced Indian couple, my parents' age, and their adult children, all sort of going through romantic turmoil at the same time. And I thought, I think I'd like to read that kind of a story.
Yeah.
Maybe I could think about writing a story like that.
The
Yeah, and the other thing I should also say is I knew that I knew that I wanted to set that story in um, a, uh, uh, a small university town in Texas, similar to where I grew up, and that's the kind of town that I haven't seen depicted very often in fiction, especially stories about immigrant families.
It Texas is such a great setting, for a story about, an immigrant family. It's a non-typical setting. A lot of I've read lots of novels about immigrant families, and they take place in New York or maybe San Francisco or Los Angeles. Some of maybe the hubs, of immigration in a lot of senses. Um, this is kind of an atypical, setting, which I love because, it really adds texture and, adds, something of the sort of, uh, I I keep wanting to say, like, out of place, but not really out of place. That's the of finding a new place is maybe a better, there's a lot going on here is what I'm getting at when and the setting really adds to that. What was it like being, an immigrant family in a part of the country that's, not really known for these types of immigrant families to live in?
Yeah, so I mean, it's interesting when you asked me before about, when I knew that I wanted to become a writer. And one of the things I've always been is a reader my entire, since I was very young.
Yeah.
And I do think, when I was growing up, I was one of few Indian American kids in my school, and sort of you feel like an outsider. And I think like many outsiders, I was very drawn to reading fiction. I found a lot of comfort in reading fiction. And when I was growing up in the 80s and 90s in this town, we had a very tight knit Indian American community. At first, it was just a few families. Over time, it's certainly grown, and I should say the town has changed a lot. That I grew up in, the town has changed a lot in the past few decades. But in this book too, there is an Indian community represented in the book, and so that was a very important part of my growing up and my experience.
Gotcha. The this story is not an analog of your family. Do I understand that your parents have not gone through a situation like this? Do you ever? Yeah, I think something that a lot of authors go through is people, question you. Is this your family? That how do you reflect things that you are conscious of and without necessarily being a mirror to your own life?
Yeah, so it's interesting. The couple at the center of this story, Suresh and Lata, they have recently divorced after 36 years of an unhappy arranged marriage, right? And they're
Mm.
each trying to start over. They're trying new things. Suresh is trying online dating for the first time. It's not going how he would have expected. Lata, she has her first job outside the home at a university library, which she loves. And a professor there asked her out on a date, which is this very new experience for her because, again, she had an arranged marriage very young. She hasn't had the experience of dating, and so so the couple that's sort of the center of the story, or the recently divorced couple at the center of the story, has this kind of background. And they have two adult children, Priya and Nikesh, who are struggling to adjust to these changing family dynamics. And they're also dealing with their own very messy relationship issues, which they're hiding from their parents. And so, there's a lot of secret keeping and discovering secret sides of one another in this novel. Um, in my own life, my parents actually had an arranged marriage too, but unlike the couple in this story, theirs is a very happy one. They've been married for almost 5 decades,
Amazing.
and so it's very different,
Yeah.
but kind of going back to what we were talking about before, this idea of the hypothetical, the what if. I mean, in some ways, there have definitely been times in my life where I've thought, oh, what if this had gone a different way? What if they hadn't been
Right.
such a compatible match? And so, in some ways, this is sort of an exercise. This is sort of an imaginary alternate path. This what if, right?
Right.
So, it very much is a product of my imagination, but at the same time, I wrote it. So all of the
Right.
characters are me and none of the characters are me, right? So
Right.
I think
Exactly.
I think an author is always in all of the characters and simultaneously not in all of the characters. So
Right. Right. Um, the idea of arranged marriages is a fun, um, trope, if you will, to play with, because like you said, in your own parents, they have an arranged marriage and they're very happy. And I think the initial reaction is arranged marriages. There's no love in it. There's no kind of magical kismet kind of thing. And we all know people that are very happy. I've known a couple that said that they were so happy for their arranged marriage because they didn't have to go through all of the typical dating and all of the uh, ups and downs of all the emotions and all that. So I I don't know what uh how that works for most people, but for some people it works out perfectly well. But this idea of that is a fun thing to play with in fiction. Have you had much response from readers who uh, you know, didn't understand the concept or, like, how fun has it been to kind of bring some of these concepts into the larger American culture, if you will?
well, I think what's interesting is I think whatever the origins of a marriage, however two people come together, right? Marriages are work, marriages are hard. And when a marriage ends, after going through decades with somebody, it's a very, very challenging thing. And so I think what I have heard from readers and what I've been happy to hear from readers is that even though this is a story about an Indian American family, the themes and what the characters are going through in this novel are things that I think are relatable to a much wider audience, right? The things that people are going through in this book, whether it's divorce or aging or seeing your family members change in ways that you did not expect and you're having trouble dealing with. Parenting young children, parenting adult children, all of it's very challenging. And so I think, even though that situation of arranged marriage is unique to this couple and the culture that they came from, I think what they're going through in this book is something that is relatable much more broadly.
Right, right. And I love the fact that you weave so much humor in this book, and um, there's something to be said for moments of levity in stories where you're dealing with very serious subject matter. Sometimes it's a thriller, or some sort of crime novel or something where you take the reader's adrenaline and you just have it pegged out all the time, and then you offer moments of levity to kind of let that emotional toll kind of drop back down, so that then when hit them with something serious, it feels that much more poignant because you've let the reader experience the full range of emotion. What does humor and levity mean to you, especially in a story that could take on such serious connotations?
Yeah, I've always been drawn as a reader to books that have humor in it, right? The books and stories that are able to combine these elements of humor and heartbreak. And so it was really important for me as a writer. I wanted to incorporate those elements of humor in this novel. But as you say, that balance is tricky to find because there are serious topics in this novel, things like divorce or dealing with aging and um, dealing with past regrets in life and coming to terms with that. And so I think it's important to sort of find that right balance, of humor and tragedy, and trying to figure out what that balance is something that for me took a lot of drafts and revising and rewriting and trying to find that right balance of the two.
Yeah. You said earlier that you had worked quite a while on this novel. When did you first begin with the idea and start kind of seeing if those ideas would morph into a larger story?
Yeah, so I started with the character of Suresh, and when I first started, it was many, many years ago. At the time, I had just graduated from law school. I was working at a law firm, and I um, uh, realized that I wanted to take a fiction writing class for the first time. So I started my first sort of uh, creative writing course, and this was one of my first. For one of my first workshops, I brought in a few pages about this character, Suresh, sort of an older, recently divorced Indian man who was starting to, dip his toe into the waters of online dating, and was sort of had this complicated relationship with his daughter who didn't approve of his online dating efforts, and still had these sort of lingering feelings for his ex-wife who had decided to divorce him. So I started playing around with that character quite a long time ago. But when I started, I thought it was going to be a short story. I didn't know at the time it was going to be a novel. And in fact, I'm not sure at the very beginning I had the confidence to think, oh, I can write a novel. So I was sort of starting with the idea of a short story. I worked on it for a while, and I couldn't quite get it to work as a short story. So I put it away and started working on other things, and then kind of took it out again a few years later because I hadn't forgotten about this character. And then at that point, I started thinking a lot more about the daughter and the ex-wife, and I started thinking about them a lot and started hearing their voices. And so I started, trying to write a chapter here or there in their points of view. And And that's really the point where I knew, okay, this is going to be a novel. This is not a short story. This is going to be a novel. But it was a lot of, stopping and starting and putting it away and for a while and taking it back out and, just really kind of just feeling my way in the dark, trying to figure out how to write a novel.
Did you at some point in writing the novel, when the world and the characters really become formed in your mind, it's like walking around with these other people in your head all the time, and it it can uh it can be comforting almost that you have these people that only you know about, and you kind of form a relationship with them, and at some point it's almost melancholy to finish the novel, because then their story's finished, or at least this chapter's finished, whatever. um th- when I guess, when did you really unlock what the core of the story was going to be, and clearly see where the story was going? Was there a moment, was there something that kind of unlocked that for you, where you're like, "Okay, now I know how this finishes. I know how to write it out now."
Yeah, I don't know that it was just one moment. I think with each of the characters, each of the four characters, I had those sort of aha unlocking moments, like, oh, I really get you now. I know
Yeah.
exactly who you are. And so I think there was not sort of one single aha moment. I think there were different ones along the way. And so that's the other thing about writing a book over sort of a on and off over a long period of time. As you reach the end of the process and you're trying to rethink, when when did I realize this? When did I realize that? You're trying to almost, reverse engineer your process.
Right.
And so,
Yeah.
I'm trying to think back if there was one overarching aha moment, and I'm not sure I can pinpoint one. I think there were a bunch of sort of aha moments along the way for each of these characters
Yeah.
for me.
How did you think about what would be a satisfying ending for each of these characters? And was there one character in specific that this character needed to have a satisfying ending, and then the rest of the characters would just kind of fall in line wherever they are? Or was there a conscious effort that each one needed to have something?
Well, not to give too much away, but I think I knew
Yeah,
that
I'm trying to speak in vague terms because I don't wanna give too much of the book away.
I think I knew that I didn't want to sort of end it with like a neat little bow on each of the characters' lives, right?
Right.
Because I don't really think that that's the way life works. And so at some level, it is a little open ended for each of the characters in the sense of what are they going to do next? How are they going to continue on their path of reinvention?
Right.
And so that was intentional. There are definitely things that are resolved by the end, but there's also, you kind of leave in the reader's mind this element of, oh, I wonder what they're doing next. It's sort of not wrapped up with a neat little bow.
Right.
And I knew, I think, quite early on that was the way I was going to leave it.
Yeah.
Um, and I
And
do think, but I will also say, I think one of the things I knew that was sort of important to me was sort of having that image of the grandparent grandchild relationship factor into the end in an important way.
yeah.
And I think part of the reason for that is I think there's something very unique about that relationship, the grandparent grandchild relationship, because it's almost as if a person can take all of these things that they have learned in the course of parenting, right? Their regrets, the things they wish they'd done differently, the things they wish they had paid more attention to when it was happening and enjoyed. And they can sort of channel all of that into this new grandparent grandchild relationship, where in some
Yeah.
ways they really do get to sort of reinvent themselves and be on this clean slate with this new little person that doesn't have a
Right.
history with them, right? And so, given that so much of this book is about that idea of reinvention, and is it sort of too late to is it ever too late to sort of change your life and think about how to reorient and reinvent your life, given that so much of this book is about that for each of the characters. I knew that I kind of one of the final images, I wanted it to be about that grandparent-grandchild relationship.
One of the other things that I really love about this book is the way that you, um, uh, display, the ideas of tradition, versus, you know, modernity, or the family stepping into the modern era versus the tradition that you bring along with you. And the the younger generation, how they sort of kind of depend on the parents anchor to tradition. And the way that they kind of react in ways that um that kind of goes against a lot of what they think that they think about life or whatever. This thing about your parents being anchored in something, and even if we stray from that a little bit, we still depend on them being anchored. And does that make sense at all? Like, there's this family connection that you sort of depend on. And I love how sort of play around with that. What was there a conscious effort to kind of play with those ideas, or how did that come about?
Yeah, there is this sort of interplay of, tradition and continuing in sort of these unchanged ways, but also having the flexibility to sort of reinvent and try new things. And so there's that sort of back and forth throughout the book. And in fact, Priya, the daughter character, she's having a really hard time with this idea of her parents changing in
Right.
these ways that she did not expect. A much harder time, in fact, than her brother, who is, you know, more understanding in ways about his parents' post-divorce lives, or there he's sort of cheering them on in ways that she's not. She's having a
Right.
lot more trouble with.
Yeah.
And so, even within the two of them, there are these different reactions to this idea of adhering to the past and being unchanging, or letting these people that you love in your life, your family members, evolve in these ways that you didn't expect.
Yeah. Well, Late Bloomers is available everywhere now. You can go grab it at your local bookstore, or we'll put links in the show notes where you can grab it from Amazon, or Audible. The audiobook came out yesterday as well, right, Deepa?
I believe so, yes.
Yeah. Have you gotten to listen to any of it yet?
I have not yet. I'm definitely going to, but I'm still sort of it's been such an exciting world when my publication day was yesterday. So I'm
I
sort of
bet.
just like catching my breath.
I'll bet. I'll bet. Well, we're gonna put links in the show notes where folks can go grab the book. I love this book. I highly recommend it to everyone. Deepa, if people are just discovering you and want to follow along your journey, is there a place online where they can connect with you and follow along?
Sure. My website is deepavaradarajan.com. My first and last name, all one word, deepavaradarajan.com. And all the information, my social media links, all those things are there. So, yeah.
Great. We'll link that up as well. Deepa, this has been so much fun chatting. Thank you so much for taking time to come on the show.
Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.